They wrote me off. I ain't right back, though. That's the problem. I ain't right back. Let's go.
All right. Congratulations, Gino. Joe.
They wrote me off, and I didn't write back.
We have a lot to discuss after what we all just witnessed. And like we all predicted, the Seattle Seahawks are now leading the NFC West in wins after the first week of football action. I mean, the LA Rams, San Francisco 49ers, and the Arizona Cardinals still have yet to win a game, and the Seattle Seahawks just beat the Denver Broncos. So we have a lot to discuss. Before we get to the content, man, we're doing cash giveaways on my Twitter account. All you have to do is be followed and have my notifications on Twitter. And now that we get all of that out of the way, break!
Yeah, 4th and 6 for me during that time. We had been just moving it slightly. They weren't moving it with big chunks. I think we had just given up a sack right before that. So wanted to be sure that we took a chance when we had a chance. And I felt confident in him.
Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Man, I just lost so much freaking money by betting on the Denver Broncos minus 6.5 versus the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, I don't think there's anyone that could have predicted what would have just transpired in the game that we just watched. Now, I don't want to take anything away from anybody because, to be honest, I think the results of this game had to do with multiple factors. I think the Seattle Seahawks prepared remarkably for the Denver Broncos, and the Denver Broncos had multiple opportunities to win the game or put it out of reach, and they were just not able to do so. They squandered multiple opportunities to do so, and we're gonna get to it right now. So the game started with an incredible 6-play drive, which ended in a touchdown pass from Geno Smith to his tight end, Will Dissly, for 38 yards. And honestly, I gotta give Geno Smith props to this. This was Patrick Mahomes-esque. I mean, you saw Josh Allen attempt to do the same thing, using his scrambling ability to lure in the linebacker and free up one of his wide receivers so he could be wide open for a big gain. And to be honest, I didn't think Geno Smith had this in him, but kudos to him and just his development as a quarterback overall, because this was a phenomenal play to put the Seattle Seahawks on the board. Once that happened, I just automatically assumed that the Denver Broncos and their souped up offense, which by the way, they have a pretty good defense as well with Bradley Chubb and Patrick Surtain. I mean, they went out and signed Randy Gregory this offseason as well. They have Kareem Jackson, Ronald Darby, Justin Simmons. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this team. So the fact that the Seahawks were able to score on them to begin with was impressive in of itself. But when the Denver Broncos took the field, I was really excited to see their offense. I mean, this is an offense that features Russell Wilson, Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton, and a man that Aaron Rodgers respects very much so in Nathaniel Hackett. So their very first drive was a 9-play drive that resulted in a field goal from Brandon McManus. That's fine. You don't get the next touchdown until midway through the second, where Russell Wilson connects with Jerry Jeudy on a 67-yard bomb. Interestingly enough, the moment that the Seattle Seahawks got the football back, they were able to score rapidly as well, where Geno Smith would find Kobe Parkinson for a 25-yard touchdown. And right before halftime, the Denver Broncos would put up 3 more points. This is where things would get interesting. This is where the very first of many opportunities for the Denver Broncos would come up. The Broncos would drive all the way to the Seattle Seahawks 1, and on 4th and goal, not only was Melvin Gordon not able to punch it in for a 1-yard gain, which would have resulted in a touchdown for the Denver Broncos, but he also fumbled at the 1-yard line. Fortunately for the Denver Broncos, the Seattle Seahawks would also fumble, so they would get the ball once again. And just like clockwork, once again, the Denver Broncos would drive all the way to the red zone, make it to the Seattle Seahawks 4-yard line, and this time on 3rd and goal at the Seattle Seahawks 1-yard line, they figured, okay, we learned from our mistakes. Melvin Gordon might not be the guy at the goal line to hand the football off to. Let's go with Javonte Williams. And Javonte Williams, and you can't make this up, would also fumble. That's 2 opportunities. I mean, at the very minimum, 6 points if you decide to go with a conservative coaching style that are now not on the board. And to be honest, this is where things would get really interesting. Nathaniel Hackett chose a hell of a time to become conservative conservative with his play calls, because once again, in the fourth quarter, in the middle of the fourth quarter, with 6 minutes left to go, the Denver Broncos would hit a field goal from 26 yards out, which fine, okay, I understand learning from your mistakes and wanting to be in a position to win the football game later on, so I respect it. Fortunately, the Denver Broncos defense would show up, force the Seattle Seahawks to a punt, and then probably the biggest highlight of the game would happen. I mean, probably the most controversial moment of the game would happen. The Denver Broncos had plenty of time. It was 3rd and 14 at Denver's 45-yard line. Russell Wilson would check the ball down to Javonte Williams for 9 yards, which to be honest, I thought was the right call. At this point, obviously, if you're the Denver Broncos, you're in 4-down territory. What happened next was just the biggest indication that the Denver Broncos game plan was either just completely flawed or they had no idea what they were doing. I mean, I don't know if Nathaniel Hackett had the jitters. I don't know what happened, because when you do this, you are clearly indicating to everybody that is watching the game on national television that you have no plan whatsoever. And that is the fact that after this, Russell Wilson would milk the clock all the way down to 20 seconds despite having all of his timeouts. And then Nathaniel Hackett would decide to bring out Brandon McManus to attempt to kick the second longest field goal, tie the second longest field goal in NFL history, and also get Brandon McManus a brand new career high. What shocks me about this is the fact that Nathaniel Hackett probably sat there. I mean, he didn't even call a timeout to think it over. That's the first red flag to me. The second thing is the fact that he actually sat down, and the brief moment he did think about this, he actually looked at Russell Wilson and Brandon McManus and said, you know what? I think there's a greater probability of Brandon McManus hitting the longest field goal of his career, tying the second longest field goal in NFL history, than Russell Wilson being able to convert a 4th and 5. I do think this is one of those situations where you could make the argument that no matter what would have happened, we would have said that Nathaniel Hackett would have had to do the other thing. But here's the thing, man. I don't necessarily think that's the case. I mean, nobody's gonna look at Nathaniel Hackett and say, you're an idiot for going for it on 4th and 5. You should have brought out Brandon McManus to attempt to kick his longest field goal of his freaking career. Nobody would have blamed Nathaniel Hackett for going for it on 4th and 5, but everyone does think he looks kind of stupid for handling this the way he decided to handle it. So look, I also want to give the Seattle Seahawks their flowers. I mean, Geno Smith, I expected to throw 2 pick sixes today. I mean, I'm not necessarily a Geno Smith hater, but just based upon what I was seeing from the man in the past, and based upon what I saw from him when he was filling in for Russell Wilson last year, and the fact that I had a pretty sizable chunk of money on this game, that was my expectation. Geno Smith didn't necessarily light up the Denver Broncos, but he was an above average, an A+ game manager. You got to give the man his props. 2 touchdowns. He was only sacked twice. He had a rating of 119.5. He only had 5 incompletions. He didn't throw a single interception. I was flaming the Seattle Seahawks coming into this matchup for believing in Geno Smith so much. I personally thought it was a little weird, but man, he definitely proved us all wrong. He at least proved me wrong, and I can see why they kept Drew Lock on the bench now. I hope they continue to have success. I figure they were tanking on purpose, but to be honest, my Dallas Cowboys have a greater chance at the #1 overall pick right now than the Seahawks do. For the Denver Broncos, every single time I've seen one of those situations where the former franchise quarterback gets traded and returns to his old team and plays against his old team, it always turns out to be like this. Sometimes the former QB wins and sometimes he loses. But I remember when Tom Brady returned to New England as a member of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, yeah, he was able to win, but it wasn't a pretty game from him at all whatsoever. Hell, Baker Mayfield had a difficult time yesterday as a Carolina Panther versus the Cleveland Brown. It wasn't horrific, but you didn't necessarily see Baker Mayfield come out and show his best stuff. And I think in this case, it's a little unfair to judge the Denver Broncos prematurely. I mean, they have a rookie head coach, which is very respected in the league. He clearly made a huge mistake that we're all going crazy about on Twitter right now. But still, I think Nathaniel Hackett, I think this is a situation where he could learn from his mistakes. And so long as we don't see like an Anthony Lynn-like run where he literally throws away like 6 to 8 games, I don't remember off the top of my head, as a result of his coaching decisions, then I think he'll be okay. I'm not going to judge him based off of one game. Russell Wilson, he had a remarkable game. I mean, he had 340 passing yards, 1 touchdown, a 101.3 rating, got sacked twice. He just had trouble in the red zone, and obviously that's going to be something that the Denver Broncos need to figure out moving forward. Maybe study the Kansas City Chiefs a little bit. They attempted to steal one of their plays this game in the red zone. I don't know if you remember that little shovel pass to their tight end. But all in all, man, remarkable game. I mean, the potential's there for the Broncos. Over 100 yards receiving for Jerry Jeudy, over 70 yards receiving for Courtland Sutton, over 60 yards receiving for Javonte Williams, which, wow. And Andrew Beck came out of nowhere in the beginning of the game and actually had over 50 yards receiving himself. The potential's there. It might take some time. I don't know how much time they have because they're in a very competitive division. I mean, the greatest division in football, but they do have time to figure it out, and the pieces are there for them to become a contender, in my opinion. I'm not going to judge them based off of this one game. Congratulations to Seattle for the win. And if you want to see me recap each and every single game, we dropped a week 1 recap prior to this video. Aside from that, I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.